Shabbat Shalom. So if you did not get the message, I am not starting my sermon series tonight, and I apologize. One of the great lessons of rabbinic life is sometimes you have to rewrite as circumstance dictate. So I still will be talking about the same Torah portion, but not quite the same thematic as those tipping points in Jewish history, which is what this year's sermon series theme is about. I think there's actually an opportunity to sort of really appreciate those moments where little things had a cascade effect, but for another month. In this week's parasha, Lech Lecha, God instructs Abram to relocate himself, his family, his kin, to an unknown land that God shall reveal to him. Now, you should know that Abraham was established, settled, prosperous, well-regarded, and probably an octogenarian. God demands that Abe disrupt his life and the lives of those he loves and cares for and relocate to a challenging, one might even say hostile environment. I find it instructive that the Torah fails to record Abraham's remarks in response to God's demand. As my teachers taught, what the Torah doesn't say is often as important as what it chooses to say. I suspect that Abe's remarks may have not been fit for the record, much less Torah print. But Scripture at least hints at Abraham's frame of mind. A little later in the Parsha where we read, "The word of the Eternal came to Abram in a vision. He said, 'Fear not, Abram, I am a shield to you.'" Fear, anger, disappointment, utter astonishment, for others perhaps elation. All of those feelings are gathered here. They are acknowledged here, and they are welcome here. This sanctuary and this congregation are home to all of you in your differing visions and commitments, both to Judaism and to America. We, here at Brooklyn Heights Synagogue, are a community, but each of us is also an individual with differing understandings, hopes, and fears. Each of us reacts and responds in our own manner, addressing our own expectations and aspirations. The one thing I feel certain of as the one privileged to be spiritual leader of this community is that this week, this very particular week, both our individual and collective emotions are running high. Over the last 2.5 days, I have been reading the missives and listening to the comments of both the professional pundits as well as my colleagues in Jewish religious and educational life. Often, those of us offering opinion or advice seem to assume that readers, listeners, are all coming from some singular place or are in need of some singular response to this clearly redefining moment in American history. So instead of arguing for a single approach at this moment, I'd like to fall back on some Yiddish chokhmah, wisdom. Not my wisdom, I can't and won't claim any, but the wisdom that Scripture offers us in a line in the book of Proverbs where we read, Chokhmah, wisdom, builds its edifice on 7 pillars. So here tonight are 7 distinct places and approaches. They're not all in agreement with one another, but they all have a place under this roof in this house. The first pillar. For some, this is not a time to do anything. We are too close to the event, either still gobsmacked or perhaps in mourning. We are entitled to linger and wait with our emotions, perhaps identifying or organizing what we are still uncertain of feeling or thinking. Don't rush. You don't need to. The second pillar, for some, this is an inward time to reflect or assess, to consider and ponder. Even if our inner emotions have coalesced and our thinking has regained focus, We are not ready to commit to exterior action, and that sort of prudence can be true wisdom. Many of us need additional time and opportunity to ask how we have found ourselves here and assess our own participation in or responsibilities to the current situation. For many of us, that means taking time to listen and consider those more expert or knowledgeable about events and details, correlations and causalities. The third pillar. You got the sense of that game you used to play as a kid, right? Play safe, find a pillar. The third pillar, for some of us, it is time to put the election and its vitriol behind us and come together as Americans, looking forward to celebrating yet another peaceful transfer of power, almost unique in the world, allowing our political affiliations to at least momentarily subside from their inflated preening, and allowing our commitment to our nation and its well-being to reemerge as preeminent. The fourth pillar, for others, now is simply the time for us to watch, to wait, to suspend our expectations and our prognostications, to attempt to assess reality rather than giving into our fears or our speculations. Not rest, but patient resolve and vigilance are our commitment at the fourth pillar. The fifth pillar, for yet others. Now is the time to gird ourselves, to strongly and loudly reaffirm our values, and prepare ourselves for a perhaps inevitable collision course that we have been set upon. The sixth pillar, for yet others still. Now is the moment for us to prepare for a new, if unwelcome, reality, to explore methods and approaches for moderating the deleterious changes we expect to see in national policy, regulation, and even acceptable social behavior, for us to seek common cause with others of differing perspective, to try to dial down confrontation and open up channels of communication wherever, whenever possible. And the seventh pillar. The seventh pillar isn't for some. It's for all of us, wherever we find ourselves, when we're ready to get there, and whatever our political persuasion. The seventh pillar is we must not write off our democracy, and we will not write off those who hold differing points of view and judgment. We must affirm all the pillars that hold up this house, the house that is this community, as well as the edifice of this great nation. We must hold on to hope. Ever committed to the audacity of hope, President Obama reflected on Wednesday that, quote, "This was a long and hard-fought campaign. A lot of our fellow Americans are exultant today, and a lot of Americans are less so. But that's the nature of campaigns," said the president. That's the nature of democracy. It is hard, and sometimes contentious and noisy, and it's not always inspiring. That's the way politics works sometimes. We try really hard to persuade people that we're right, and then the people vote. And then if we lose, he had a little back and forth with Joe Biden there. And then if we lose, we learn from our mistakes. We do some reflection. We lick our wounds. We brush ourselves off. We get back in the arena. We go at it. We try even harder the next time. The point, though, said President Obama, is that we all go forward with a presumption of good faith in our fellow citizens, because that presumption of good faith is essential to a vibrant and functioning democracy. That's how this country has moved forward for 240 years. It's how we've pushed boundaries and promoted freedom around the world. That's how we've expanded the rights of our founding to reach all of our citizens. It's how we've come this far. Close quote. We cannot move forward as a nation if we will not offer that presumption of good faith in our fellow citizens to all our fellow citizens, not just to the ones who voted with us. I take issue with those who consider Donald Trump's election confirmation that America is now a failed state, a la Paul Krugman, or that America is no longer trustworthy for us Jews, a la Peter Beinart, or that the Klan won on election night, a la Aaron Sorkin. Now, there is no doubt that haters of every variety see in Trump's election their own victory, but that doesn't make it necessarily so. Without doubt or excuse, Trump's campaign allowed breathing space and sunlight for some of the most obnoxious and despicable voices of intolerance to reemerge from under their rocks and from out their lairs. But it is my personal assessment that the vast majority of people who voted for him were not driven by misogyny or racism, but by a dangerous but understandable desire to throw the dice, hoping for something better than they have experienced in these last decades. It is far too facile to label and dismiss every American who voted for Donald Trump as a misogynist or bigot. I do not doubt that the overwhelming majority, probably 99% of American misogynists and bigots, racists and homophobes did indeed vote for Donald Trump. I don't know what their numbers are. They don't register that way. And his silent encouragement, or at least his permissive silence, remains despicable. And it indicts him as morally culpable for the increased chatter and incidents of anti-Semitism, misogyny, xenophobia, homophobia that have indeed reemerged in American public life over the course of this campaign. But I do not believe that the vast majority of those 59.5 million people who voted for Trump are misogynists and bigots, anti-Semites and homophobes. No. We who voted differently do not have permission to now stereotype and delimit the motivations of citizens who exercise their own personal choice in our constitutional system and chose someone else. Are we so certain that we know the motives of other people that we are willing to stereotype and label and condemn our relatives, our friends, our colleagues, the members of this congregation, and our neighbors in our community? Too many of us who supported the losing candidate seem to have discarded her go high approach. And having lost the election, some seem to have given themselves permission now to go low, stereotyping those who voted for the president-elect as deplorables. 59.5 million deplorable citizens. Today's political posturing, to my rabbinic mind, is reminiscent of the once very real tensions between the parties, except they didn't call them political parties back then, they called them academies, founded by Hillel and Shammai during the Roman occupation of Jerusalem. Now, centuries later, in Talmudic retrospect, the policies established by the Academy, read political party of Hillel, eventually, not in its day, prevailed over the policies of the Academy party of Shammai. Why, asks the Talmud? Because the Hillelites went high. They were kindly and modest. They studied their own rulings, but they also studied the rulings of Beit Shammai. They were sure to mention and consider the words of their opponents alongside their own. As Secretary Clinton asked of us, we need to go high, not just before the election, but now after the election. We owe the president-elect, she said, an open mind and a chance to lead. That said, my grandmother would have commented, but not such an open mind that your sechel, your brains, and common sense fall out. Open and opening. In other words, we need to try to suspend the disdain that many of us hold for the man who is now also president-elect, and recognize that the office he now rightfully holds needs to be given a chance of succeeding for all of us. For many of us, this means gritting our teeth, yes, and giving the president-elect a chance that we don't want to really give him. But it's not for his sake. It's for the sake of our nation, our democracy. And yes, if he falls short, we must also be there and be ready at that moment to hold him accountable, as we would do with any leader. Giving our new president-elect a chance is perhaps even hinted in this week's Torah portion when we read of the birth of Ishmael to Hagar. I don't come up with these texts. They just present themselves at the opportunity. He shall be a wild ass of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. But he shall dwell alongside all of his kinsmen. Later, having promised the covenant to Isaac, God reassures Daddy Abraham that his son Ishmael will still have a role to play as well. As for Ishmael, I have heeded you, says God, and I hereby bless him. I will make him fertile and exceedingly numerous, the father of chieftains. I will make him also a great nation. From a biblical perspective, God works through all sorts of interesting characters, don't you think? Our great democratic tradition obliges us to give the president-elect at least an opportunity to succeed. But that does not mean that we need to sit back and wait the outcome come what may. There is tremendous work ahead of us, and I know that for many it feels like it will be a replay of previous decades. Regardless of who fills the office of president, we Jews must remain ever vigilant and uncompromising in both our commitment and efforts to demand that our nation's executive office actively and publicly repudiate racist, sexist, xenophobic, homophobic, and anti-Semitic statements, and God forbid, actual incidents, no matter their source. The silence that some, even many, were willing to tolerate during this campaign can no longer be tolerated or allowed to continue. We in the Jewish community especially have the experience and mechanisms to monitor and publicize incidents of verbal or physical assaults, ensuring that they are immediately and publicly recognized, condemned, and if possible, prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. We need to get the creatures back under their rocks. And a transition to a Republican majority in the House and Senate, in addition to a however nominally Republican president, means that those of us who lean left of center can expect immediate and challenging changes in federal policy, regulation, and judicial nominations. These are arenas. Remember, those were President Obama's words, the arena. We get back in it. These are arenas where we will be called upon to offer, to proclaim, and to assert our progressive Jewish values and commitments. From preserving the wall that properly separates church and state, to reaffirming the necessity of a two-state solution to safeguard Israel's democratic identity and its security. From affirming women's rights to control their own bodies and be treated and compensated equally in the workforce, to Scripture's demand that we not take advantage of the poor and needy, that the pay of the laborer be fair and timely, and that we neither favor rich nor poor, but judge each individual with equity. from welcoming the stranger and protecting the rights of immigrants, to instituting reasonable firearms regulations to diminish the uncontestable slaughter of innocents that takes place every day in this country. From expanding our understanding of the boundaries of human liberty to our embrace of scientific knowledge and evidence. On August 20th, 1790, the first president of the United States, George Washington, responded to Moses Seixas of the synagogue warden at Hebrew Congregation of Newport. He wrote in response to the warden's letter, "The citizens of the United States of America have a right to applaud themselves for having given to mankind examples of an enlarged and liberal policy, a policy worthy of imitation. All possess alike liberty of conscience and immunities of citizenship." I recognize the imperfection of Washington's letter while people were held slaves. And yet, in his time and place, this was a step forward, not a step back. All possess alike liberty of conscience and immunities of citizenship. It is now no more that toleration is spoken of as if it were the indulgence of one class of people that another enjoyed the exercise of their inherent natural rights. For happily, the government of the United States, which gives bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens in giving it on all occasions their effectual support. May the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of its inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid. May the Father of all mercies scatter light and not darkness upon our paths, and make us all in our several vocations useful here, and in his own due time and way, everlastingly happy. George Washington. President Washington, we are still rolling up our sleeves. The path of history, we are reminded, is not straight. It's not a line. But as President Obama said, it zigs and it zags. And yet, over the course of 240 years, the line down those zigs and zags has been progress and forward. A final thought, a prayer from Rabbi Naomi Levy. Often we offer prayers on behalf of our country and its leadership. I'd like to share this beautiful prayer she has written, a prayer for our country after the election. Help us, God, to unite our great country in the wake of a contentious election season. Teach us to listen to one another, to heal and to hope. The days that lie before us are our days to shape. Let them be days of repair. Days when we join together to build a new future. For some of us, the results of this election were a deep blow. For some of us, those same results were a cause for celebration. Our charge today must be to rise above all conflict, to rise above our differences, and welcome in a new time of understanding. Bless us, God, with ears to hear, hearts to love, and hands to reach across party lines so that we can ensure liberty for all, dignity for all. Land of opportunity and dreams, may we protect your majestic landscape, and may we treasure the freedom that is our birthright. Teach us, God, to pledge our allegiance to every soul in need and every child praying for a better tomorrow. Bless America, God, with peace, with prosperity, and with justice for all. And we say, Amen. Ken Yehi Ratzon. As always, I invite your responses and reactions, critiques, the sermon I should have given, all of those things as we gather for some nourishment after the service. Thank you for always the privilege of being able to share my thoughts and my opinions from the pulpit. There's a lot of stuff up here. I'm sorry. I need an AV tech, really. We are going to turn to those in need of health and healing, whether it be great or minor. You can find the text of the Mi Sheberach pasted in on the inner